Hi, this is Joe again with another review. For the sake of this video, we're going to be discussing Elaine Bennis's favorite movie, the 1986 Oscar-winning film English Patient, starring Ralph Fiennes, Julie Binoche, Kristen Scott Thomas, and also it has William Dafoe in it as well. Of course, this film, like I mentioned, is Elaine Bennis's favorite movie. Sarcasm here. In case you know what, before I get into the main part of this review, which is of course reviewing the movie The English Patient, this movie was spoofed on an episode of Seinfeld, and the premise of that episode is, of course, when Elaine Bennis goes out on a date with a boyfriend to see the movie The English Patient, and she didn't like it. I mean, she really didn't like this movie, and of course, her boyfriend loves this movie, thinks it's the greatest movie ever told, the greatest love story ever told, and and all that. And when he finds out that Elaine says that she hated the movie, what he did was he dumped her for not liking the movie. He dumped her for not liking the movie, the movie The English Patient. And everybody around Elaine in that episode, they all love the movie. And she's the only one in the world who didn't like this movie because she thought it was too long, it was too boring, the love story was horrible. I mean, he's telling this whole story because this movie is a long. I mean, it is a long movie. I mean, there's only criticism that I agree with Elaine. And it's the movie is long. It's a 2-hour 45-minute movie about a guy telling a story about a love story. And he's out in the desert. And he falls in love with a married woman, has an affair. And she gets, just stop telling you a story about the dumb desert, and just die already. Just die. and her boss, Jay Peterman, takes her to see the movie, and she's squirming in the seat. She can't stand the movie. And says, "No, the movie is too long. I can't stand it." And he says, "You don't like the movie?" And she goes, "I hate it." Everybody goes, finish up, and she always yells, "Oh, go to hell!" And the boss says, "You don't like the movie?" He said, "No, I hate this movie." And the boss says, "You're fired." Actually fires Elaine because she didn't like the movie, the movie The English Patient. And it says, "Oh," and the boss says, "Okay, I'll rehire you if you go to the area where they filmed the movie." So she had to go. If you want to give her a job, she had to go to the area in Africa to see where they filmed this movie. But that's the reference I made. Well, the English Patient movie, we should mention, now going into the movie, the movie The English Patient is about Ralph Fiennes, who is a map maker by profession, and he gets hired by his archaeological group to help map this area in Africa. From the air, from the desert, and it's like just before World War II started in 1938 and 1939, and of course World War II starts, and of course during that time he ends up falling in love with a married woman who's played by Kristen Scott Thomas. And while I should mention that most of this movie is in flashbacks, as Ralph Fiennes is telling the story of remembering his life while he's slowly dying from injuries sustained in an airplane crash. I should mention. But the movie does start off with Ralph Fiennes flying in a plane. The plane crashes and he gets all burned. And he has all this burns pretty much all, for most of at least 90-95% of his body is all burned up. So he's been taken care of by this nurse who was played by Juliette Binoche, who was kind of hot, who was hot in this movie, and she's taking care of him, and they had to move all the patients because of the German army, so he couldn't be moved because it was too painful for him. Because over the burns all over his body, so he found this abandoned monastery in Italy, actually. And they stay there for days on end until when he finally does die. which does happen at the very, very end of this movie. He does finally die. After 2 hours and 45 minutes, he dies at the end of the movie. And practically throughout the whole movie, he is remembering where the story was. And there were times where he tells the story to other people. And not just the nurse who's taking care of him, but eventually William Dafoe's character comes along, finds the monastery, finds him, and they have a little confrontation because they did meet before, and William Dafoe was going to kill the Ralph Fiennes character, and then Ralph Fiennes tells him what happened, or at least his side of the story, and then William Dafoe says, "Okay, I'm not going to kill you now. I understand what happened. Now I'm not going to kill you." And so the rest of the story is, the rest of the movie pretty much is flashbacks. But it do take a long time between the flashback stuff to find out what's really going on at that time. When the nurses take care of Ralph Fiennes, giving him shot after shot after shot of morphine to control the pain, and then he's telling the stories, and then you find stories with this guy from the Indian Army, the Sikh from the Indian Army who finds landmines. And he's like a landmine expert, and he finds out how to disarm landmines, finds them, and disarms them. So you had all those storylines, and a love story going on between this and the guy from the Indian Army. So you had those whole plots going on, as well as the flashbacks of Ralph Fiennes' life and his love affair with Kristen Scott Thomas's character, who was a married woman in the Army, and she was actually married, in the movie she was married to Colin Firth. Of course, later on, like years later, like 15 years later, ends up winning the Academy Award for playing King George VI in The King's Speech. So you see him in this movie too, one of his early roles, in this movie as well. And Ralph Fiennes starts a love affair with Kristen Scott Thomas, and they do have a passionate love affair with each other. And at one point they do decide to end it, and then of course the husband, Kristen Scott Thomas's husband, dies. So dies in a plane crash. So now, of course, they are free and clear, as they say, to be in love with each other. Well, what happens is that they were in a plane crash. So the husband dies, and Ralph Fiennes was able to get Kristen Scott Thomas out of the plane, and he's carrying her across the desert, and they find this cave. And Ralph Fiennes puts her in the cave. He said, "Okay, I'm going to go and get help." So he walks 3 miles, not 3 miles, for 3 days to go to the city that's actually occupied by the British armed military. So I figured, okay, great, since I'm Scottish, or part of the Scottish, the United Kingdom, then they can help me out. Well, they figured that he was a spy for the German, because he didn't have a quote British name. He had more like a German name, so they figured that this guy, that Ralph Fiennes, was a German spy with a British accent. So they jailed him, and then he escapes. Finally goes back to the cave where Kristen Scott Thomas was, and finds out that she had died, from her injuries from the plane crash. So now he has no sense to live anymore. So he does join since the British figured that he was a German spy, he gave the Germans all the maps that he had created, not only the maps he created, but all the British maps that he had in his possession. He gave them to the Germans out of spite because of that delay that he was in prison cost his lover's life. So, and of course he was then cleared of all and that's why William Dafoe's character says, "I understand what you did." I said, if I was in your position, I would have done the same thing too, out of spite because of what happened. And then so William Dafoe he leaves, in the modern day, for this movie, he leaves. Then of course then they find out that the war had ended, and when they were in the monastery, And then Ralph Fiennes' character, okay, after he finally, it's kind of like a Titanic. It's almost the same ending as Titanic, and Titanic came out like a year later, where after when Ralph Fiennes tells his story, he dies. It means like the same ending in Titanic. It's almost kind of like edited that way as well, like the same premise, but one thing was like a historic event, Titanic, with fictional characters, and that's what this was, because they give a flash at the end of the movie where some of the characters, they did use some of the characters' real names in this movie, especially the soldiers in particular, but they fictionalized everything they did in this movie. They fictionalized everything. They named the actual places were real. It's kind of like being a Dan Brown novel. All the places were real. All the work is real, but the story is fake, fictional. That's what this was. The names were real, but the story was fictional. And contrary to what Elaine Bennett says who hated this movie, I didn't think the movie was as bad as Elaine said it would. It says that it was long, and it is kind of a little bit boring. And I felt it was too long. It could have been maybe 20 minutes shorter. At least 20 to 30 minutes shorter. Because I don't think you need all that stuff with William Dafoe's character. I don't think you need all that stuff in there. You didn't need the guy who was disarming landmines. I don't think you need all that stuff. It just kept it to the nurse and Julian Binoche's character and Ralph Fiennes, with Ralph Fiennes telling her his backstory. That would have been just fine. Just the two of them in there. I don't think you need all those extra characters. In the modern day. This movie is probably like 1944-45, when Ralph Fiennes gets burned in a plane crash and dies. That was probably 1944-45. If they just did Ralph Fiennes and the nurse telling him the stories, it would have been at least maybe anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes shorter than what it was. But that's how they did it, and I didn't think it was a bad movie. And I just felt that was maybe a tad too long, and I was kind of bored watching this movie. But I didn't think it was, although, I mean, it is the Oscar-winning movie for 1996. It did win the Oscar for Best Picture, and I feel that, of course, like I said, Titanic came out a year later, and it's like almost the same premise, where it took an historical event and he put fictional characters in there, and one of them tells a whole story. In fact, pretty much most of the movie is in flashbacks, especially with the sinking of the Titanic, and put your hands on me, Jack, and all that type of stuff. It's almost the same. Looking back in hindsight, English Patient, Titanic, even though they're back-to-back Oscar-winning movies, it's almost the same premise. Even though The English Patient is based on a novel, it's like almost the same premise almost. But it's not a bad movie. It's also one of those movies that's kind of forgotten in terms of Oscar-winning movies, because it's not as iconic as Titanic was, or maybe Forrest Gump was. I'm talking about movies that went in the 90s, or Silence of the Lambs was, or something like that, or even Dances with Wolves. I mean, movies are iconic in the 90s. And this one, this is almost a time where you didn't have like this huge blockbuster movies that was winning Oscars, like Titanic was the next year. There was a huge big blockbuster movie that won the Oscar for Best Picture, and I think it's going to be the last real big blockbuster movie to win the Oscar for Best Picture, in my opinion, and that's the Titanic. But The English Patient, I say it's not a bad movie, but like I said, if it's cut down 23 minutes, I think I would like it more. But it's not a bad movie. It held my interest, for the most part, especially when they were in the monastery, and the flashback scene story, and that could throw you a little bit, because the flashbacks weren't consistent throughout the whole movie, they had more breaks in between the flashback scenes like you had in Titanic. You didn't have that many breaks between Rose's story in Titanic like you have in The English Patient. And that's my honest, that's my opinion for what it's worth. And I did like the movie. I mean, it's not like a dying to see this movie again, but it's like a Oscar-winning movie that crossed off my list to see. So that's my review of the movie The English Patient. Please click on the video, please rate it, please subscribe to my channel, and please forward this video onto your Facebook pages. And check out all my reviews and on my YouTube channel at rallyc.com, so WDY, and then at c.com. This homepage is a Rally Reviewer. Check Christy Moore. Please check out all of his videos on his website. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time.